AskReddit. Driver instructors of Reddit, what's the most insane thing you've seen a student do? Obligatory natty, but my friend ran over a cow on a driving lesson. First time driving manual, they panic revved the engine to redline and dropped the clutch. The car launched, then they slammed the brake without taking it out of first gear or pushing the clutch back in. Not a driving instructor. Just live outside a house where the driving instructors love to teach their students to parallel park. It gets so bad, it's like coming out to watch a movie and how close they get before the driving instructor has to step in, which is a lot. Mr. Francis is great at stepping in at the last possible second. Makes it worth buying popcorn and drinks to watch this nervous kid's almost crash. Note, they cannot see us. We live in a very shaded spot by large building. We sit in our screening porch. We don't try to make too much noise. We have no reason to make the kids more nervous. Not a driving instructor, but this guy I know drives a Crown Victoria, which is what most police cars are for those who don't know. The instructor, who was black, got in the car with him, and the first thing the guy said to the instructor was, "So is this your first time riding in the front of one of these things?" The instructor got out of the car and refused to test him. I was the passenger when the incident happened. Our driving instructor forgot to mention she had issues with diabetes. She passed out when the worst of the three of us were driving. The kid driving panicked and immediately went off-road, through a fence, and into a field of cows. We hit a cow. The car was pretty much totaled. And since this was in the middle of nowhere, we didn't have a cell signal, so we had to find the owner of the cows to call 911. Our instructor was put on leave. The cow somehow walked it off and only had a few scrapes to show for her getting hit by a fucking car. And we all got to redo our training a month later with a new instructor. My best friend is a racing driver who is very helpful. He will gladly help anyone with their track skills upon request because of his passion for driving. One day I met a friend who also happened to be a girl that was just the type of person my racer friend would be interested in. She, however, was not a great driver because of her immense fear of driving and actively sought out help for her issues. With my all-knowing wisdom, I tried to set them up by getting my racer friend to give her some lessons. This setup did not go as planned. My biggest mistake was telling my racer friend that a girl wanted lessons, but not specifying what type of lessons. When the day of the lesson comes around, my friend asked the girl to go to the local track. This confused her, and she asked my friend why they had to go to the track. He said it was the best place to learn, and she kindly obliged. They show up there, and my friend says he'll take her for a couple of laps first to show her how to do things. They get in the car, and he takes off like a madman. This girl is immensely scared of speed and driving, so she starts bawling her eyes out and is paralyzed by fear. My fiendish friend does not notice this and continues to thrash the car around for a full lap. Only after this does he notice her state of being. He immediately stops and exits the track. She, still crying, jumps out of the car and proceeds to call me to pick her up as she is too scared to drive home. This all happens while my racer friend is sitting in the car mortified and unable to get up due to shock or realizing what he has done. I come and pick her up and she refuses to talk to him for the next 2 months or so. At this point, I realize I should probably stop trying to be a wingman. I also realize that my friend is a forgiving person as he did not run me over. Yes, I did create an account just to post this story. My own instructor told me a horror story a few years ago. One student of hers had a panic attack while going around a roundabout and passed out. The car didn't have dual steering, just brakes. So my instructor instinctively slammed the brakes on, causing them to get hit from 2 directions. A car ran into the back of them and another into the side as it tried to merge. They were both fine, luckily. Kid ran over a raccoon, stopped the car, and threw it in the backseat. He continued to drive like nothing happened. I once saw a kid in a backwoods student driver car throw an entire pizza box out the window while driving. My instructor told me that he once had a student who put the handbrake on in the fast lane of a motorway when he told her to brake. So as a child I learned to drive race cars on racetracks because my dad was a race car driver. When the time came to have my first official driving instruction on the road, I got picked up by the instructor. I was far from excited as this was child's play for me at this point, but whatever, I wanted my license. Not but 5 minutes into the session she wanted me to turn down a one-way street, going the wrong way. I objected, but she persisted, so as any 16-year-old would do, I said screw, let's roll. We made it about 3/4 of the way down the block before a lifted Chevy came down the block going the correct way. She was terrified. I threw it in reverse and backed into a driveway, and after the truck went by I followed him out. A few years later, as an instructor at a performance driving school, I had a student in his new Z06 Vet. At about 160 miles per hour down the long back straight, I felt a really bad vibration and made him pull into the pits. He was pissed because I made him stop. I got out and found that his DIY brake job didn't work. The vibration I was feeling was the brake caliper bolt getting smacked by the spokes of the wheel at triple-digit speeds heading into a brake zone. That's when it set in what could have happened. I teach performance driving, autocross and track stuff, and had a student once who would turn in and then completely let go of the wheel and catch it as it unwound when finishing the turn. I sent him home with homework. He's a good friend and usually faster than me now. He also keeps his hands on the wheel. This is something the instructor did. Middle of winter, I was in one of my driver lessons, and by this point, I pretty much had the driving thing down. We head toward a part of town that doesn't have any traffic, and she slams on her brake. We spin. It was terrifying. Nobody was hurt. Everything's all good, and she explains she does that to students, so their first time is in a controlled situation. There are just far too many ways for that to go horribly wrong, and let me tell you, it didn't stop the panic when it happened to me a year later, and I was alone. I was in the backseat of a fellow student driver and the driver's ed teacher. We got T-boned by some dude who ran a red light, and the driver's ed teacher, who's ex-military, got out and ran after the guy who sped off. He ran a good quarter to half a mile before he came back and said he got the guy's license plate and car model and called it in. Former instructor and manager of a driver's ed here. My husband was also a driver instructor there too. Usually the students were great. BC it is optional in our state. Where I worked it is part university town, but there are a lot of rural towns that we serve too. The farm kids already knew how to drive. Some of them were better than me, lol. The story that sticks out in my mind is a driver's exam my husband did. The kid backs out of the spot and goes to turn out of the parking lot. But he was so nervous, I guess, that he almost turned in front of an oncoming vehicle. My husband had to slam on his brake to avoid a collision on his side. If they had been hit, my husband probably would have had some nasty injuries. Anyways, that was, of course, an automatic fail, so he had the kid go out onto the street and turn back into the parking lot at a different entrance. Kid almost started to turn in front of yet another vehicle. They get back and come in and tell the kid what he will have to do to eventually get his license, and he leaves. My husband fills me and then goes in to teach the class that was just starting. All of a sudden the dad comes in and starts tearing into me. My husband comes out and this guy tries to argue with us for like 30 minutes until I had to threaten to call the cops. His poor son is sitting there, head in his hands, looking like he wanted to cry. I felt so bad for him. But that was crazy. The bigger problem was the drivers around our students. The cars we used were obviously marked as driver's ed, but other drivers would be rude and dangerous anyways. After I left the company, we moved. We found out that one of the vehicles had been hit during a lesson. So they were driving, and some guy on his cell phone turned into them. The student did absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, he did everything right. Well, the instructor, a good friend of ours, had just had a stint put in a few days earlier. The force of the crash knocked his chest into the side console, and it ended up tearing the artery. He died a few hours later. So some asshole on his cell phone caused the death of this amazing guy. Although, if I had still been the manager there, I would have not allowed him to go out on drives yet. But still, love you, Paul. Driving with my mom, still on learner's permit. We are driving on a busy road, stopped at a light in the right lane with a no right on red sign. She tells me to turn right when the light turns green. Light turns green and I turn. left across 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. Thank God my car accelerates quick, so most of the other cars hadn't started yet.